It's Newsday Tuesday with Richie and John. A podcast to uncover what's really going on.
The Mutual Broadcasting System presents Richie and John, the podcast that connects you with the people, events, headlines, and lifestyle interests of the global LGBTQ plus community.
America's reaching a crucial stand. The threat's no longer long. Understand. With President Rapist and Elon at his side. Cybertrucks from Tesla, they can run, can't hide. Taking to the streets and shouting enough. Lesbian, gay, bi, trans, and lies stay tough. We face the MAGA madness, seen their ire. Now's the time to set the stakes higher. Cheers to Newsday Tuesday. Buckle up tight. With persistence and courage, we fight the good fight.
Here's Richie Roy and John McMullen.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of Richie and John. It is Newsday Tuesday when we bring you the latest and greatest, or not so greatest, in LGBTQ news from around the globe and right here at home. I'm, of course, joined with my intrepid co-host, John McMullen. John, how are you?
I am very intrepid. Thank you very much, Richie. How are you?
I'm okay. I mean, all things considered,
We've been
it's
MIA for a couple of weeks now, and so it's good to be back with people and kick off a new Newsday Tuesday.
Yeah, no, it's been nice. Yeah, we took a couple episodes off. I went on a little road trip with some friends and got a little R&R, which was nice. It was good to unplug.
I took a little road trip, too, into the OR, but my road trip involved a little bit of anesthesia.
Yeah, so we attended to various things, and now we are back, and we've got plenty for you. Just a reminder that there's a lot going on in the world. We generally keep our news focused on the LGBTQ community. So while things may be going crazy in Ukraine or, with all kinds of different things, there's plenty we could talk about, but we like to talk about our community and how the news of the week affects us. And so, with that, we're starting off with a story about something that's coming up this summer.
It's a global story, but it's also a national story, and it involves World Pride, which happened, I think, just a couple of years ago in your neck of the woods.
It was in New York, right? But this year, it is slated to be in Washington, D.C., at a weird moment to have a worldwide celebration of all things queer in a place that in a country that is currently showing itself to, at least its administration, to be antithetical to many of our beliefs and to our even existence for many of our friends, including our trans friends.
Yeah, for sure. Well, let me get into it here with the details, and we can talk about this. Booz Allen Hamilton. They are a major federal contractor that is based in D.C., and they have unexpectedly pulled back their sponsorship from the World Pride Festival. The decision follows adjudicated rapist U.S. President Donald Trump's executive order that dismantled diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts within the federal domain. In response, Booz Allen noted for its substantial governmental contracts, ceased all DEI initiatives and stripped diversity objectives from management priorities, and they eliminated related terms from communications. Historically, an ally of the Pride movement, Politico reports that Booz Allen Hamilton's past social media acclaim for such events seems to have been purged. Despite withdrawing as a headline sponsor, they insist on their ongoing commitment to diverse employee opportunities and communities, though the specificities around the LGBT plus group were notably absent. World Pride organizers have expressed shock and disappointment, particularly given the firm's strong past support. And meanwhile, some sponsors like Marriott and Hilton maintain their backing, but challenges do persist. And as safety concerns prompt similar actions from other advocates internationally, this is something that we need to pay attention to.
So, this brings up a couple things about World Pride. First of all, I'm not surprised by this move. I'm disappointed, but Booz Allen Hamilton is right in the pocket of just sort of the DC kind of consulting, contracting elite. And whatever the administration says, they are going to toe the line immediately. So I'm not surprised at all that if Trump says no DEI, they're going to just jump to it because they don't exist without government contracts.
Yeah, you may as well say classic K Street Northwest.
Yeah, it is. I mean, it's so unsurprising to me, but it is disappointing because, they sort of traditionally have, been supportive. But, I think it kind of brings up, it brings up several things. One is the corporate cowardice that we're seeing. This is kind of a perfect, a classic example. We've seen a lot of it, though, and increasingly more and more of it. We're seeing very rare outliers, Costco, being one of them for sure. But the airlines, are they still kind of holding strong?
They are.
Well, that's good.
Delta, United, American.
So there is that. And then the other thing is really about what is World Pride going to be like this year? We saw rumblings this week of, the Trump administration talking about things like taking control of running DC, wanting to do that. And you also have things like World Pride is, global. And what happens when people from other countries want to come here in a moment where immigration and even just being someone who is foreign to the United States is code word for persona non grata? Are they going to issue visas to people to come for World Pride? Are they going to specifically make note of people who are coming and disallow them from having visas? And once they get here, is it going to be, I think if anything, World Pride needs to kind of pivot. And, if it's in Sydney, maybe there it's fireworks and, EDM music playing. But I think that if World Pride is in DC, it kind of has to be a protest, a global protest.
Yep. It's got to be our next march on Washington.
Yeah. So it'll be interesting to see.
My favorite meme of the past week that I saw throughout the social media sphere was, I hope America is as lucky as the Delta jet in Toronto. Everyone survives, but the right wing explodes.
That's good.
Yeah.
I like that. Yeah. But so Booz Allen, shame on you. We can add you to the name and shame list for sure. And I'm sure that there will be more to come. But there is a broader movement right now. These executive orders that are coming out, anti-DEI, anti-trans, whatever, they're so vague and so threatening that what they're causing is a lot of, I believe the term is anticipatory obedience, which is in the vacuum of information, assuming the worst and kind of adapting your behavior accordingly. Because what we're seeing is things like nonprofits altering websites under federal pressure. And this is going to be another front here. So the Rape, Abuse, and Incest National Network, or RAIN, along with other nonprofits like the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children and the National Sexual Violence Resource Center, have removed mentions of transgender individuals from their websites. The move follows an executive order from Trump threatening to withhold federal funding from organizations endorsing what it terms, quote, gender ideology. And this goes back to the executive order that says essentially that gender doesn't exist, that sex exists. Biological sex at birth, male and female only, is the only thing that this federal government will understand and acknowledge. And so anything that isn't that is, quote, gender ideology, which is verboten. So as a result, these organizations have stripped stories and resources related to trans individuals.
And by the way, for those of you who are not that well educated, verboten is forbidden.
Yes. And also a term, that was used quite handily and often in Nazi Germany. So yeah, verboten. So these organizations have stripped stories and resources related to trans folks, drawing criticism from advocates who stress that trans people face significant risks of sexual violence. Despite the website changes, RAINN assures that its services remain accessible to all survivors. The National Center for Missing and Exploited Children and others, heavily reliant on government funding, have made similar content adjustments, sparking debate. GLAAD, the LGBTQ media watchdog group, argues that these executive orders are not legally binding and harm both trans individuals and broader nonprofit missions.
Of course they do.
The legal challenges against these orders continue amid growing concerns about inclusivity and safety. So this is right. So this is part of the tactic here. This anticipatory obedience is you don't know what's going to happen, because what the federal government under this president is signaling is, if you don't do what we like, we will stop funding. And regardless of whether or not it's legal or defensible or will hold up in court, what they are already doing in many respects is they will just stop funding things, choking the lifeline, or the lifeblood out of an organization, and then make them fight to get the money back, to get the money rolling again, and they might not even win. So what they're really doing is making it so unappealing to be brave, because again, they're targeting a vulnerable community, trans folks. RAINN is a great organization that's been doing important work for ages. And what they've been given this terrible choice. Do we continue our mission for all folks who are victims of rape, abuse, and incest? Do we continue the work and freeze out trans folks for now, maybe bring them back later or not? Or do we stand firm and maybe risk it all and lose all of our federal funding? It's a really unpleasant place to be. And I get how that decision is tricky. And maybe, and again, they're kind of trying to have it both ways, maybe scrubbing the website, but making kind of vague statements about including all.
Yeah.
Because there's no easy way to navigate this, because the boundaries aren't clear, really. All you know is that this is an administration that has shown that it is thin-skinned, bent on retribution and on command and control and power and viciousness. So they don't care if victims of rape, and abuse and incest are out of luck.
Why would they? I mean, they themselves are often the abusers who do these things to their victims.
That's a great point. It's a really bad moment. And the thing is, we're going to see a lot of this with the nonprofit sector, because nonprofits are reliant on federal grants, some state grants that may trickle through, be pass-throughs from federal monies. And we're seeing this administration weaponizing funding in this very direct way. And again, they don't care who they harm as long as they get what they want, which seems to be one of the main things they want, is to erase trans people.
Yeah. Well, this story, one of the things that I am heartened by is that lower court judges are doing their job and are at least a first line of defense and making sure that it is on the record, the legal record, as to the inappropriateness of what the administration and their ilk are doing. And while the final decisions are going to be ultimately, I think, at the Supreme Court level, I'm quite hopeful that there are some of these things that we're seeing that are so beyond the pale when it comes to constitutional rights and responsibilities that even the Supreme Court is going to have to not rule in the administration's favor on a number of these things. There are a lot of judges that were appointed by previous Republican presidents and even by Mr. Trump himself, who are not supporting a lot of his current behavior or his administration's behavior, and are being put to the test, this loyalty test. And in the end, I have read a few pieces on this by people who are real substantial legal scholars who are saying that he is in for a day of reckoning sooner than later. What remains to be seen is what happens in that regard, because we're already seeing now in different contexts, lower court decisions being ignored by this administration. And
courts trying to figure out what to do. I mean, whether to, bring Marco Rubio in under civil contempt. It's like this is all really going to sort of tell the story about what power does exist. Whether or not courts will be that last line of defense, because what we've seen that the legislature is not going to be that.
Right. I just have a feeling that this 4-year term is going to be unlike no other we're likely to have ever seen before, or probably will see again anytime in the near future, based on what does or does not happen, because I think we're going to see how that, judicial part of our system is going to deal with having to, for lack of a better term, discipline or spank the executive branch of our government and put them back into place and tell them, regardless of which side you're on, these are, this is the baseline set of rules you have to play by.
That is right. The problem, or not the problem, but the thing that we will have to see what happens with is, there are the people who they have picked. At this point, the people in charge of the DOJ and the people who are the lawyers that are carrying the water for this administration. Many of them, I think they went to like the porta potty school of law or something. These are not, established, jurists. These are bad lawyers bringing sanctionable, things before the court. Frankly, I think a lot of this stuff in a normal world that would get you disbarred for even filing, or at least, slapped by the court. But, there's those who maybe just, maybe they don't know better, but then there are folks that should and do know better. Again, JD Vance, he has tweeted that essentially the executive branch should feel free to ignore judicial decisions that it does not like, which goes against Marbury versus Madison, like going back to literally just sort of the foundational elements of how our constitutional system works. And he knows that. So we'll see.
Sometimes I think, and I don't say this to be irresponsible with my words, but sometimes I think that these people have just truly festered for so long in that environment that they have become mentally retarded. And I'm not saying that as like an insult. I'm saying that like as in an official diagnosis, that they have become so ingrained in this way of thinking for so long that they have lost all touch with the reality of the world that they live in and have been educated in. Because certainly he, as, somebody who's graduated from a law school of some distinction, was taught better than what he is acting.
Absolutely. And, but I think you bring up a good point too about getting stuck in that, getting so steeped in this kind of crazy land, this sort of through the looking glass that you have to be in to believe the shit that is coming out of each other's mouths day in and day out. And that particularly is something that is going to increase in the coming period. I saw there have been reports out of various reports that various agencies have been told or directed to terminate immediately accounts with things like the New York Times, Politico, Associated Press, UPI, Washington Post, whatever the case may be, major news outlets. There are agencies that are being directed to immediately terminate their subscriptions to those.
Yeah, let alone their access to their branches of government.
And so what we're going to see is, like you mentioned, this kind of echo chamber. There are going to be, and a lot of press outlets that are at least somewhat reputable are being iced out of hearings, and
namely the Associated Press.
But also, I think it was Department of Defense. They've switched out the press pool, and they've gotten rid of the Times and CBS and NBC, and they've replaced them with Newsmax, OAN, Fox. Just the bottom of the barrel, and that is the News Corps that has access now. Yeah. And so what we're going to see is there's going to be this sort of feedback loop where the real information and real facts aren't going to get to these people, and they're just going to be steeped in an alternative universe.
Well, that's what they've been doing for 8 years now. And the reality is that those other media agencies are not going to go away. NBC, ABC, PBS, CBS, and National Public Radio and others are not going to be disappearing. And in fact, I think we're going to see them reporting on every ugly thing that we couldn't even begin to imagine before, as much as there has been stuff that we couldn't imagine already that has permeated the airwaves or the cable circuits, as they may be, or satellite services. But they're not going to quit reporting things. I think what they're going to be doing is showing you exactly what you're not getting. And we're going to end up with mainstream media businesses delivering fringe, or what the government will call fringe information, but it will ultimately infect the minds of people who realize, as their lives become affected in negative ways, that, you know, just as we didn't see the price of eggs drop, we didn't see inflation, you know, pull a big U-turn, or any of these things that Donald Trump promised we didn't see a war end on day one in the Ukraine and Russia skirmish. We did not see Israel and Gaza, you know, back to a peaceful state of being. You know, none of that stuff has happened. He never delivers on anything that he promises. The only thing that actually ever happens when he is involved, or people in his mindset are involved, is chaos. Mm-hmm. And the more chaos, the more distraction, the more we're not paying attention to any one given thing, and the more that they can get away with. And that has certainly been happening, as was promised, as we started talking about Project 2025 and what was in that part of the agenda. You know, they're moving towards things like, you know, the overturning of Obergefell and other things that affect your family, your rights, your safety, your being able to rest assured that you're going to be able to take care of your child or your partner, or, you know, who knows? You have people in this country who are citizens, you know, true blue citizens of the United States of America, who, because of the color of their skin, are simply being cast as being outsiders and should not be here, and are going to be, you know, lost the same way that kids were when they took and separated parents from their children. So it's going to be a shit show. And the more that this happens right now, I'm convinced the better. I heard Eric Swalwell the other night actually use the F-bomb trying to explain his Thursday. And it caught my attention, because it's not something you usually hear from the decorum of a Democratic Congress member. And when he went into this diatribe about what was going on and what they were doing to slow this down, I'm convinced that there's enough of them now who have really, truly woken up and know that they have one job and one job only, and that is to preserve the way of the United States of America that we have known for our whole lives, because life has totally changed. And as a lot of these people who I think supported the Trump re-election campaign are realizing that, you know, oh, fuck, he lied to us again. You know, people who thought he's not really going to do these things. He didn't do them all. They all said that was what was going to happen last time when he got elected, and all that didn't come to be and all that. So it's not going to be that bad. He's going to get us back on track. No. And I think that we have an opportunity in 2 years to take a fire hose to this Congress and to this White House and to fix this. And we cannot fuck around these next 2 years. We have to get this thing fixed.
Yeah. And I think that this is a messaging issue. And I think the Democrats, like, you know, right now it's so chaotic. I think the Democratic Party is doing a horrible job. I'll give them a minute to try to figure their shit out. But right now I'm not super pleased with. There are a couple. I mean, there are some bright lights out there. Swalwell and AOC, and then you have, you know, people like Adam Kinzinger. There are people who are out there understanding the assignment here, whether they are Democrats or folks who are just disenfranchised former
the ones that we're going
Republicans.
to need to get people motivated, remotivated after just taking this huge ass kicking are people like David Hogg, who is now the vice chair of the Democratic National Committee. And he is a young man who has a very bright future. And albeit his notoriety came from a horrific, tragic event in the state of Florida, I think that he is a shining light to get young people involved in a way that we have not seen them before. So I'm really hoping that people like him are going to play a significant role in moving us in the right direction and not staying with our ass in the sand, doing the same old shit, different year.
And I think it really comes down to targeting people who are going to get hurt and who didn't think they would get hurt. A great example is, this is coming out kind of like, quite recently, that Medicare is canceling telemedicine as of April 1st. They're just not, it's no longer going to be available. So no more telemedicine if you're on Medicare. All those people, all those folks who are,
Homebound
homebound Trump voters who cannot, or who live in rural areas very far from a provider, we need to find a way to get to them and make them understand that connect the dots. The reason why you are stuck at home sick and dying is because of the person who you voted for. And you can choose to fix that late. You can choose to try to fix that now. But we need to we need to do that for many different types of communities. For, people who work in automotive plants. When there are steel tariffs and aluminum tariffs that make those lines go dark. That is because of a vote that either you or your friends made, and you can fix this. But we need to connect these dots because people are not making those connections. They're just, for whatever reason, I think we just have to be brutally straightforward and really show each state and each locality and each demographic and each industry exactly how you are being harmed by the decision either you made or your friends made.
What do you think about the idea that a brand new American-made car just went up 25% in expense because of a tariff that he convinced you that they were going to pay when in fact we pay it on our consumers' end.
Right. Exactly. But anyway, we were talking about courts, and courts are right now really in a huge way not loving what this administration is doing and are handing their asses to them in TROs and preliminary injunctions. And a second federal judge has issued an injunction against Trump's executive order aimed at cutting federal funds for institutions providing gender-affirming care. The ruling delivered by Judge Lauren King will temporarily halt the order as legal challenges continue. The lawsuit, which was backed by attorneys general from Washington, Minnesota, and Oregon, claims that Trump overstepped by regulating medical care typically overseen by individual states. Judge King agreed, stating that Congress, not the president, not the king, controls federal spending. Trump's order seeks to deny funds to hospitals and universities that offer gender-affirming services, an act that Democrats and advocates describe as discriminatory against transgender people. They describe it as discriminatory against transgender people because it is discriminatory against transgender people. Previously, Judge Brendan Herson also blocked the order nationwide. Legal experts argue that Trump's actions violate the Constitution by directing federal agencies to discriminate. They do. Some medical institutions have already been denying care in anticipation. This includes major institutions like NYU Langone, not little podunk institutions. When that money is on the line, when you could lose federal funding for your research university, research hospital, that's a tricky place to be. And some of them are just kind of laying over. Again, anticipatory obedience. The ACLU has hailed the court decisions as affirming healthcare access and equality for transgender individuals. So courts and the people who are bringing the cases in the courts.
Well, keep it coming because, as much as they want to distract us with all this nonsense that they're doing and get us lost and pissed off and not wanting to pay attention to anything that they're doing while they continue to rob the treasury themselves and not have to pay their fair share of taxes. Because that's what, at the end of the day, this is really all about, is the billionaires and the multimillionaires don't want to have to go without these huge tax cuts, which this president, the felon, is handing them right and left. They don't want to spend that money. And the only way they can do that is that they can balance the budgets. And the way that they do that is to cut these programs and these necessities. And when I see a motherfucker like Elon Musk wearing a sweatshirt at Christmas time, a Christmas sweater, you saw the beautiful Christmas sweaters that Richie and I donned that were the Richie and John show Christmas sweaters. We could have just as easily have sent one of those to Elon Musk and Donald Trump. However, Elon chose to wear one that says, fuck children's cancer research. And that's because he needs that money to go into his rocket ships and his cars, his failing trucks that burn up and blow up and, fall apart at the wrong end of a hammer being thrown at it because they're such pieces of crap. I'm over the billionaire class. I used to be one of those people who really believed that in America, if you were an innovator and you built something and it rewarded you with a wealth because it was so popular, that there was nothing wrong with that. But I did not take into account what unfettered wealth does to people as human beings and how awful it makes them behave towards other people. And I've often thought about, people like Bill Gates and Warren Buffett who've been very clear about what they want done with their wealth now and into the future beyond when they're living and breathing, and thought, oh, that's really noble of them, except they're just as bad. They really are. In their own ways, they have become really not great people. And I don't know how we deal with that, because I certainly would not want to see us do things to discourage innovation in our world. Good things come from it, but the bad things that have come seem to supersede that. And I don't know, it kind of destroys me thinking about, is there a potential for any goodness for all people on planet Earth?
Yeah. It's a sobering thought for sure. It's especially, there are many different ways to kind of think about that can make one concerned. Obviously, there are things like immediate things. For instance, there are potential for an increase in militarized actions because of this administration's cozying up to Vladimir Putin, which could have effects on Europe, which obviously would have effects on Ukraine. And, but the thing is,
several other countries.
Well, and many other countries. And the thing is, with someone like a Vladimir Putin, you don't build goodwill that you can then bank on later. It's not like we'll give you Ukraine now and later we'll get something from you. It is a one-way street. Yeah. And so as soon as the United States, basically doesn't just roll over and piss itself, there could be military action here. Donald Trump is.
There will be. At some point.
Yeah, exactly. And so, there's a chance of, in the short term, things like, military action here, abroad, elsewhere, economic hardship, which does hurt people in a real way, especially the neediest of us first. There's that. And then there's the medium to longer term things, which is having an administration of a country that is a huge consumer and polluter, having an administration that's basically saying fuck the earth, down to banning paper straws from federal government buildings. Let's get those plastic straws back, and ordering the halting of federal funding for electric vehicle charging stations, talking about drilling in the Arctic or whatever.
I'm surprised that President Musk allowed him to do that.
The thing about the charging stations?
Yeah.
No, it makes perfect sense. It makes perfect sense because Tesla has a huge advantage in the charging station infrastructure already. And we can talk about this on a show with our good friend Todd Bianco, but the Tesla plug standard, NACS standard, is now going to be on all cars who are electric cars that are model year 2025 or calendar year 2025 and later. So you're going to have a bunch of cars with Tesla plugs. Tesla already has the infrastructure light years ahead of all the other ones. And they're killing any competition by removing any kind of federal funding from them. So of course it makes sense for Elon Musk.
Yeah.
He's actually like that. This plays into his hands.
Well, I want to get back to our topic of the moment, really, which is about judges and having them save our lives, hopefully. Never thought I'd say that about judges, but in a heated court session, U.S. District Judge Anna Reyes has criticized the felon, Donald Trump, and his executive order that banned transgender individuals from military service, and describing the order's mention of pronoun use undermining troop efficiency was frankly ridiculous. She said the policy reveals twice previously impeached Trump's animus towards the trans community. And we talked about this over the weekend on our last episode where we had Laura Meeks with us. But during the hearing, DOJ attorney Jason Lynch represents the administration in justifying the ban by claiming that it enhances military readiness. However, Reyes questions the honor and discipline of trans military members who challenged the order. Highlighting their service, Reyes asked Lynch to concede that these individuals make America safer, which Lynch then had to affirm. Reyes ridicules the notion that trans pronouns threaten the military's effectiveness, suggesting that the policy lacks support and shows clear bias. She challenges the administration to provide evidence of its deleterious impact, offering metaphorical cigars for proof, despite DOJ claims that challenges to the order are premature. Legal opposition mounts against what plaintiffs call discriminatory action founded solely on bias without valid justification. Amen. Mm-hmm. The judge is right.
Yeah. I mean, it doesn't pass the smell test. I mean, no. It's ridiculous. And again, this goes, if you read some of the transcript moments, Judge Reyes is just handing these shabby attorneys their asses because they can't defend it. I mean, it's it's indefensibly stupid. And
it's such a waste, by the way, of taxpayer resources. I mean, you want to talk about government efficiency. These lawsuits, they do nothing to fix anything. They just make life worse for people.
Yeah, it's not a great place to be in, for sure. But we have judges who are more aligned to their constitutional sort of
calling.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. They're not. I mean, the thing is, again, these lawyers who are filing these things should be disbarred.
Yeah. At least these judges doing what the Constitution calls upon them to do.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But yeah, no, I mean, I think you're right that right now we're in a moment where we have fewer and fewer places to look for help. And thankfully, the lower courts right now, like you said, even judges who were appointed by George W. Bush or Trump himself in Trump 1.0 are saying this stuff is bullshit. So at least they're doing that. We've talked a lot about the federal government, but in the past on the show, we've talked a lot about states because states are also an important place where things happen. And
one state in particular that's caused a lot of trouble itself that's not Florida and is not Texas, but is appropriately named Missouri.
Yes. So Missouri Attorney General Andrew Bailey has filed a lawsuit challenging Kansas City and Jackson County's bans on conversion therapy for minors. These ordinances established in 2019 and 2023 prohibit practices aimed at altering a young person's sexual orientation or gender identity. Bailey's lawsuit claims these bans infringe on the First Amendment rights of Christian counselors by forcing them to abandon their beliefs during therapy sessions. Opposing the lawsuit, the city and county vowed to defend these laws, which penalize violators with fines and possible jail time. Bailey's action follows a recent executive order by President Trump addressing anti-Christian bias, which could potentially bolster Bailey's case. Kansas City Mayor Quinton Lucas criticized Bailey, emphasizing a need to prioritize pressing local issues over cultural disputes. Similarly, Jackson County Executive Frank White Jr. stated that their commitment to safeguarding residents from harmful practices disguised as therapy. Though conversion therapy is denounced by major medical associations, Bailey argues it's a First Amendment issue, seeking a legal path to overturn local restrictions.
Yeah, it's the First Amendment issue, all right. It's one where they've been allowed to encourage young people to kill themselves by telling them that they're just not right, that everything about them to their core is wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I think that anybody who does that should be subject to being a accomplice to somebody being executed.
Yeah, it is really crazy to me. This get out of jail free card that has been used time and time again. This First Amendment religious freedom card that the Supreme Court has allowed to become, like, not to be punny, but a trump card over rational, neutrally applied laws and rules and regulations. You can just say, but wait, I'm a Christian. I can make kids kill themselves. Like, that's literally that's the line of thinking there. And it's really, and the thing is, you know, it's true that the current administration did issue an executive order directing federal agencies to look into instances of anti-Christian bias and go at it directly. That includes, you know, the DOJ and the Department of Education and all of the departments. And so, yeah, there's a message from this administration that anything that they deem to be anti-Christian will be targeted, and they will weaponize the federal government against states and against localities in their pursuit of that agenda. So, yeah, this is a real thing. And
it's insanity.
It is complete insanity.
You know, what I would do is, if I ended up in one of these situations where this issue had to be litigated, I would say, well, then I think we need to subpoena the Almighty or his son. And if they don't show up, you got to toss the case. I mean, it's absurd.
Yeah. And the idea that, you know, a Christian, a Christian therapist or a Christian counselor has to abandon their belief during therapy. Like, what? I mean, by that logic, I mean, you know, if some crazy cult, you know, some cult leader counseled folks that, you know, they should, you know, if you have red hair, you should jump into a volcano. Like, are they not, like,
or if you believe in me, you should drink the Kool-Aid.
Right. No, exactly. It's literally drinking the Kool-Aid. This is drinking the Kool-Aid, but now you have a First Amendment right to, you know, to pass the Kool-Aid cups out. It's just insane.
Well, as you know, and by you, I'm saying the greater you, all of you who have the opportunity and desire to listen to Richie and I opine time or two each week on various issues. We like to try and end each Newsday Tuesday, if we can, with good news. And I do think that our final story that we're going to talk about here briefly is in that category. I mean, it's not the greatest things that we're talking about, but it is a positive direction when you think about all that is wrong in the world today. And Richie, you want to share with us?
Yeah. No, this is one that, you know, it's worth sort of paying attention to. So despite recent policy changes, a Gallup poll reveals that a majority of Americans still support transgender individuals serving in the military. Released last Monday, like not this Monday, but the one before, the poll highlights that 58% of U.S. adults favor allowing trans folks to serve, even as the Trump administration reinstates a highly discriminatory trans ban. This ban challenges trans folks by restricting their military service and implementing a ban that affects around 8,000 to 15,000 trans soldiers, not to mention all the folks who might be trans who would think about joining the military who now can't. The poll does reflect a decrease from a 71% support high in 2019, primarily driven by diminished Republican and independent backing. Republican support plunged to 23%, down from 43% in 2021, while independent showed a drop to 62%. Democratic support remains strong at 84%, but has fallen slightly since 2019. 2 federal lawsuits have challenged this trans ban in the military, spearheaded by organizations like GLAD Law and Lambda Legal, advocating the cause of active duty trans members and aspiring enlistees. I mean, this situation underscores the continued struggle for trans rights in the military. The Republican support question plunging from 43% down to 23% suggests to me the depth to which this kind of MAGA hateful insanity has just ripped through the Republican Party and Republican and society generally. Yeah. I mean, that number is remarkable to me, and just suggests that there are some brains that are so infected that, whatever Trump says, just becomes reality for them, because again,
it's funny, considering the fact that if his mouth is moving, he's lying.
Right. Because if you look at it again, it's trans. This is about trans folks serving in the military. This is people wanting to do what, generally Americans generally think of military service as something that is honorable, that is in support, a patriotic support of the country, and that should be something that people broadly should, if they want to, because it's a volunteer armed forces, be able to do in order to do, the work of our nation. But no, they've decided that, well, actually, if you think about it, and if you look at what's happened recently, things like cutting the funding for the VA Veterans Lifeline hotline and other things, the sort of long-standing idea, sort of generally held idea that veterans and sort of active duty soldiers are people that this country values, actually turns out that Trump and his ilk don't give a shit about that at all. Cutting the VA, sure. Getting rid of the veterans hotline, why not?
Yeah, and remember, those guys, if they need that service, they're losers and suckers. I'm using his words, of course, not mine.
Yeah, his words, exactly. And to this point, having a military that is fully staffed up and ready to go with people who want to do it, who happen to be trans, nah, fuck them. So, and it just shows that, that if that is the priority of this person and his coterie of idiots and sycophants and lickspittles, then a huge chunk of this country will fall right in line.
Well, hey, we, of course, love to hear from you, and there are several ways for you to get in touch with us. The easiest is just to go to our website, which is richieandjohn.com, RICHIEANDJOHN.com. There at the bottom of the page is a contact form. You can fill that out, and it will send us a message with anything that you'd like to comment on that we've been talking about, or if you'd like to share a point of view or have a perspective that you think that we've not covered, please share it with us, and we'll be happy to share it with the entire audience. We can also receive messages, and you can put those in your voice, so we don't have to take a chance of reading between the lines. And our phone number is area code 878-768-8825, 878-768-8825. And our email, if you still use that, is info@richieandjohn.com. We also have a snail mail address on the website. So if you want to send us something with a envelope and a stamp, if you still believe in the old school way, please feel free to do that. The address is on the website as well, and we would love to hear from you. We'd like to know what you think about the program. We'd like to know what you think we should be talking about if we're not covering it, or if you know somebody who has been at the wrong end of any of the actions that have come about as a result of this administration and the changes, or if you think that the president and his men and questionably some of his women, if they have been right about things and we've got it wrong, feel free to let us know what you think in that regard as well. You do not have to be part of our way of thinking. We actually enjoy once in a while hearing from people who've got a different point of view to our own. So we encourage you to do that. I'd also like to encourage you to stay on top of news that's going on. We're going to be starting to add our stories to our website again. But one thing I would love to ask you to do is to pay attention. One of the resources that Richie and I both rely on each week to get a lot of stories that we like to talk about is LGBTQnation.com. That's www.lgbtqnation.com. They're part of the company Q Digital, which also has, you're probably familiar with the website QueerTea, and there's a number of other services that they offer. And so we would love it if you would patronize them as well, because they do a great job of covering what's going on in the world as it affects our community. So putting that out there for you, and we hope that you have a great week, and we'll look forward to being back with you on Saturday's show, and hope you enjoyed this past weekend's program. If you didn't catch it, it's still available on our website at richieandjohn.com with Laura Meeks. Richie, have a great week.
All right, you too.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us on Richie and John. This podcast is a production of the Mutual Broadcasting System and is available at richieandjohn.com, as well as most major podcast portals, including Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, and Spotify.